Okay, hi, I'm Jordan, and I love helping people engage with data. And today I'm going to be talking about how something I call conversational sonification can help us do that. But first, some background. So I spent about 10 years helping people who think that they hate data find insight in numbers. And I did this mostly as a data journalist. And there are three big lessons and ideas that kind of stuck with me from that experience. So number one is I used to work in radio, and I would spend months crunching numbers only to have that turn into one line in a radio story. Because getting quantitative data into people's ears is actually pretty hard. Okay. Insight number two, so I've made graphs, I've made animations, I've made countless interactive maps, but in my experience, the most powerful tool for actually helping someone draw insight from data is to just have a conversation. So you and me sitting down, chatting about the numbers, asking each other questions. But the problem is that's really hard to scale. Okay, insight number three, so when I was a journalist, we worked so hard to gather and vet information, but then we kind of ignore how people actually learn, right? So learning happens when we interact with information, not when we just passively receive it or absorb it. So I took these three insights, and I now am a PhD student at CU, so thank you, graduate school. So in information science, where I'm using a human-computer interaction approach to tackle this problem, researching what I call conversational sonification. So let's unpack what that actually is. So first, what the heck is data sonification? It's basically just making a graph, but with audio. So you can map data onto elements of sound, so things like pitch or timbre or tempo, and you can do this with instruments, you can do this with code, you can do this even with the human voice. So I'm going to play a short excerpt from a sonification I made. Hopefully this works. This is about U.S. coal production over time. Let's take a listen.
A lot of coal, a little coal. If we string the sounds together, again with each note representing 1 week, it sounds like this. An audio history of U.S. coal at 10 weeks a second. Here's coal production at its peak in 2008 and in the past 6 months. It fell off a virtual cliff.
So I hope you could hear that. Sorry, it's a little bit quiet. So the software I used for that is something called MIDI Time. It was actually developed by Michael Corey of Reveal. He used it to sonify earthquakes in Oklahoma. And you may have heard it recently. Sophie Chow used it on PRI's The World to sonify school shootings data. So journalists are using this, but I often hear this question like, okay, that's really cool, but does it actually help me understand the information, or is this just like a fun gimmick? So that's a great question, and I'm going to defer to Bruce Walker, a quote from him. He's kind of a sonification guru, and he says that for sonifications to be useful, they need to be interactive in some way, especially if your goal is learning and discovery. So data karaoke, anyone? That would be interactive, right? But, no, really, how far can we take interaction? That's what I'm curious with. So I think if we really want to take this far, it would be interacting with your voice, right? So being able to ask questions, right? To dynamically zoom and pan and filter, to ask for context, to navigate, right? With your voice. And I call this conversational sonification. And this is something that would have been pretty impossible until a couple years ago, but how many of you guys own a Google Home or an Amazon Echo? Yeah, quite a few of you. So basically, with all of these advancements, this is moving from science fiction to something that's actually feasible. So I'm not a developer, but I made a kind of a paper prototype, if you will, in audio of what a conversational sonification for your newsfeed might sound like. So let's take a listen. I'm using kind of an audio version of Lorem Ipsum text. It's got wind chimes in it. So.
Alexa, what's going on in the news?
Congress is arguing about a thing, and people are reacting to it. Trump tweeted a thing, and people are reacting to it. The stock market moved, and people are
reacting to it. I get it. Okay, but is there anything interesting in the news?
We've got an audio graphic that lets you explore the data behind the latest big story. Would you like to interact with the data?
Sure.
Here's what the data sounds like over time. Bigger numbers sound like this, and smaller numbers sound like this. Here's the data from 1980 to today. Bleep, bloop, bleep, bloop, bloop. You can play the whole thing again. Zoom in on a specific time range or year. Or change it so you hear a different measure over time.
Okay, play 1999.
In 1999,
What was going on in 1999?
we were all freaking out about Y2K.
Right, okay. What other data can you play?
I can play this other really important metric. High values sound like this, and low values sound like this. Here's from 1980 to today. Bleep, bloop, bleep.
Okay, so that's what it could potentially sound like. So as I dive into this research, I've got a bunch of questions. So first, some design best practices, right? So what would this actually sound like? And what can we learn from people already working in this space, like podcasters and electronic musicians? Next, what's the technology itself look like? So a lot of these tools are there, but some of them still need to be developed. Context, this is the one that I'm most interested in. So would this work for news, for education, for understanding your personal health? What other domains are there out there? And finally, how do we tell if this is actually effective, if this is helping people understand data and information? So, as a fledgling researcher, I'm actively looking for collaborators. So, if you're a developer who is excited and wants to experiment with voice interfaces, if you're an electronic musician, or if you're just someone who has a cool idea for how you might apply conversational convocation, come talk to me. I would love to chat. Thank you.